All right, get ready, because today we are going deep on Robert Rozier. This guy's story is absolutely wild. I mean, superstar athlete to a convicted murderer.
Or, yeah.
But also, it's not like a straight line between those two things. There's a few pit stops along the way that you just would not believe.
What's so interesting about Rozier is, well, the way his life kind of tracks these huge themes, like the idea of fame or searching for who you are, or even like the really bad stuff that can happen when you take an idea too far. It could all be really easy to make this a cartoon, but the truth is way more complicated and honestly, so much sadder.
So let's go all the way back to the beginning with Rozier. Born in Alaska, raised in California, and this guy was like a total physical freak.
Really?
Yeah, we're talking high jump, 6'7", a vertical jump of 10 feet, bench pressing 375 pounds, and all this in high school. It's insane.
Wow. Yeah, it really does seem like he was meant to be like a huge sports star.
Oh, absolutely.
And he definitely had what it took, right? Drafted by the St. Louis Cardinals, played in the NFL and the CFL, but even with all that success, it seems like there was some trouble brewing, kind of under the surface.
Oh, yeah. All those allegations of drug use and all the petty crimes. It really made me think, right? Like, were all those crazy physical gifts almost like a blessing and a curse at the same time? Like,
Mm.
maybe he just wasn't ready for all that talent, the fame, the money, the pressure.
Yeah, definitely possible. It's something you see a lot with young athletes, especially the ones who get really good, really young. That change from nobody to star can be rough. And if you don't have the right people around you, it's easy to get caught up in the wrong enough.
Yeah, and you got to remember, this is back in the 70s and 80s. Things were so different back then. People didn't really understand addiction or mental health the way we do now. But okay, then things get really weird. Rozier joins this group called the Nation of Yahweh. They were all about Black Hebrew Israelism.
Huh.
And get this, he gets rid of all his stuff, changes his name to Neriah Israel. Like he completely erased his old self.
That's interesting. It might seem crazy at first, like he's just totally ditching his old life. But if you think about it, there are some things that connect his life as an athlete to this new path.
Oh, really? Like what?
Okay, so think about it. In both sports and this group, there's that same focus on discipline, on knowing your place. It's like belonging to something way bigger than you. So in a way, maybe the Nation of Yahweh was giving him that same structure he had as an athlete, but just with a totally different set of beliefs.
Wow, that's a really interesting way to look at it. Like he was searching for that same purpose and community, but found it in the wrong place. And that's where things take a dark turn, right? He gets involved with the Brotherhood, which was the Nation of Yahweh's violent side.
Yep. And their crimes, well, they were just awful. Multiple murders, some seemingly random, some more planned out. I read this thing about them cutting off a victim's ear and giving it to their leader. I mean, where do you even start with something like that?
Yeah, that's chilling. When I read that, I was just floored. But what was the point of doing that? Was it like some kind of ritual or a way to show they were loyal?
I think it was probably a few things. On one hand, it was probably to scare people and show how brutal they could be. But it also says a lot about who's really in control, like how the leader could get his followers to do these unimaginably horrible things.
Right, the whole cult thing. It's so hard to understand how someone like Rozier, with all his success and potential, could get sucked into that.
It just shows that even the smartest, most talented people can be tricked, especially when they're looking for meaning or a place to belong. These groups prey on people's insecurities, They take that desire for a purpose and twist it into something dangerous.
And it's not like he was just blindly following orders, right? He was part of these crimes. He made choices that had terrible consequences.
Exactly. And that's the part that's so tough to understand. All that violence, doing things most people couldn't even imagine. It's almost impossible to get how someone could go that far.
So what happens next? He gets arrested, right?
Yeah, he does, and that's when he makes a decision that changes everything. He decides to testify against the Nation of Yahweh.
Wow, 22 years in prison in exchange for his testimony. It's tough to know what to think about that choice. Was it real remorse? Or was he just trying to save himself?
Yeah, it really gets to the heart of who Robert Rozier was. Was he a true believer who got brainwashed? Or was he just a manipulator looking out for number one? It's probably somewhere in between, honestly. But it's a question that just keeps coming up in this story. It's like a shadow.
Okay, so he makes this deal, serves his 22 years, and then he gets out, gets released under witness protection. It's like he's being given a totally fresh start,
Right.
a chance to just start over. And you know what? For a while, it actually seems like he's doing it.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. After everything he went through, you'd think he'd be completely broken, right? Just lost in the system. But instead, he built a whole life for himself outside of prison. Starts a business, has kids, even learns web design.
It really does make you wonder if he finally turned things around. Like maybe all that time locked up made him face his demons and actually change for real.
Yeah, and that's the question that makes this story so interesting, so frustrating, and ultimately so sad, because we know it doesn't last.
Oh, yeah, things fall apart. And it happens in the most unbelievable way. Rozier gets busted for bouncing checks. Checks, like the things people used to write before, Venmo and Apple Pay.
It does seem kind of crazy, right? This guy committed all these horrific crimes. He was at the center of this huge controversy, and then he gets taken down by something as simple as bouncing checks. But this was in California, and they had this thing called the three strikes law.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Remind me how that works again. I don't think most states have a rule where, like, a parking ticket can land you in prison for life.
Most states don't, you're right. But the three strikes law was like a sign of the times. Crime was going up. People were scared. So the idea was, if you commit three felonies, that third one, no matter what it is, gets you an automatic sentence of 25 years to life.
Seriously. So even if it's something small, like shoplifting or bouncing checks in Rozier's case.
Yep, automatic life sentence. It was
Wow.
supposed to scare people straight, keep the bad guys off the streets, and a lot of people supported it back then. But like we see with Rozier, sometimes it could be way too harsh.
Yeah, it's hard to see this as justice. Those bounce checks were his third strike. And because of his past, he's sent back to prison, this time potentially forever. I mean, how do you make sense of that? On the one hand, yeah, he did those awful things and he served time for them, but then turns his life around and this one little mistake sends him back. It just doesn't seem right.
It makes you think about what our justice system is really for, right? Is it about punishing people or helping them change or keeping everyone else safe? Or is it all those things at once? The three strikes law was supposed to keep dangerous criminals off the street, but it also meant really harsh sentences for people who might not have been a threat.
So what do you think? Was this the right outcome for Rozier?
Honestly, it's a tough one. There are good arguments on both sides. Some people would say, look, he committed those terrible crimes. So any other offense, no matter how small, means he deserves a serious punishment. He already had a second chance and messed it up.
Yeah, I can see that. But it also feels like we missed a chance here. Like, if the system was more about helping people change, things could have been different.
That's the really sad part of Rozier's story. He pulled himself out of a really dark place. He built a life. And then the system that was supposed to help just pulled him right back down.
It's crazy to think it doesn't end there. This life is just full of twists. So in 1999, while he's serving time for those bounce checks, another murder charge comes out of nowhere, this time from New Jersey.
Yeah, this charge was for a murder that supposedly happened back in 1984, before he was even involved with the Nation of Yahweh. And it gets even weirder, because Rozier claimed he saw someone else do it, and that he helped the police.
Wait, hold on. So he's saying he saw the murder, but they're charging him with it.
Exactly. But the police didn't buy his story. They thought it was some kind of ritual killing, maybe connected to some other group Rozier was involved with.
So what happened? Did they have any proof he actually did it?
It was all pretty flimsy evidence. And in the end, they dropped the charges because they didn't have enough to go on.
Wow, this whole thing is like a tangled mess. You have this guy serving a life sentence for bounced checks. Then this old murder charge pops up. He says he's innocent and even helped the cops, but they don't believe him. And then they drop the charges anyway. It's just bizarre.
It really does make you wonder what was going on behind the scenes, right? Was it a real accusation that just fell apart? Or were they just going after Rozier because of his past? Like maybe they figured someone who did the things he did with the Nation of Yahweh must have been involved with other crimes too?
It's like trying to put together a puzzle where half the pieces are missing, and the other half might not even belong to the same puzzle. But whatever the truth is about that 1999 charge, it's clear that Rozier's past just kept coming back to haunt him, even when he was trying to start over. Man, what a story. It started with him being like a football superstar, then, religious extremism, shocking violence, moments where it seemed like he was turning things around, and then in the end, back to prison. It's been a wild ride.
It really is a story that leaves you with more questions than answers. Huh. I think that's exactly what makes Rozier's story so fascinating. And it really gets you thinking. It makes us look at some uncomfortable truths about, well, about ourselves, about the systems we build, about how hard it is to really change.
Yeah, it definitely stays with you. I mean, we covered so much his incredible athletic ability, how he got pulled into that extremism, working with the police, trying to build a new life, and then that crazy, harsh sentence because of the three strikes law. It's almost Shakespearean, right? Like a rise and fall and then another rise and fall.
Yeah, and through it all, there's that one question that keeps coming up. Can someone really change? I mean, can someone who's done such awesome things truly be sorry, turn things around, and actually become a good part of society again?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's not an easy one to answer. I mean, there are parts of Rozier's life where he seems like he's on the right path, like he's really trying to make things right. But then there are other times where it seems like, well, like maybe he's still got that darker side.
That's like you said earlier about the blessing and the curse. I think that's what gets to the heart of it, that two-sided nature of people. We're all capable of doing good and bad. The choices we make, the things that happen to us, they all shape who we are, but they don't always define us.
So where does that leave someone like Rozier now? He's in prison in California. They've denied him parole a bunch of times. And his next hearing isn't until 2028. Is there any hope for him at this point?
Hope is a powerful thing. It can keep you going even when things are really bad. Whether Rozier still has hope, well, that's something only he knows. But his story, no matter how it ends, shows us just how complicated people are.
It reminds us that there's not always a clear line between good and evil, that even the most promising people can get pulled into dangerous ideas, and that trying to make things right is never easy.
And maybe the most important thing is that we need to look at each person, each story, with understanding and a little bit of kindness. Because even when someone has done terrible things, there's always a chance for change, a chance for growth, a chance for understanding.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Robert Rozier's life, we're left with one big question to think about. What does his story tell us about ourselves, about the choices we make, about the power of hope, even when things seem impossible? I hope you keep thinking about that long after we're done here. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.